I know you're gonna dig this.
This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles, recorded live here at DATV Studios in Dayton, Ohio. Zooming in all the way from Newport Beach, California, Vernon Porter. His recording career began in the 70s and 80s on records by Dave Mason, Kenny Loggins, and Bette Midler, just to name a few. Welcome, Vernon, who is originally from Columbus, Ohio, and thank you so much for agreeing to do our show.
Oh, well, it's a dream for me to be with you this morning. It's truly an honor for me.
You know, Vernon, when I look at your career, and I'm going to be very careful since we talked last night. We can't just pick up like we talked last night. We got to start from scratch here. So the first thing I want to talk about is the beginning of your musical career as a child and how you worked up to where you were. And then the second phase of this, we'll talk about your turning point in your life on your second phase of your music.
Sure.
So
well, you know, it all started when I was 12 years old in the south end of Columbus, Ohio. And I started thinking about this the other day, you know, the trajectory of my career. A lot of it has been due to drummers. When I was 12 years old, we had a bully in the neighborhood. That wasn't surprising in the south end. They used to chase us smaller kids around. And one day he yelled out, "Hey, kids, stop. I just want to talk to you." And so I get to know him a little bit that day, and his name was Charlie Settles. He said, "I want you to come and sing in my band." And I'd studied alto sax a little bit in grade school, but I never really had anything as a musical career on my radar at all. So that's kind of the starting point for me at the age of 12, singing in his band and, you know, doing our little neighborhood gigs, making just enough to go to the drive-in after the gig and pick up a hamburger and a piece of pie, you know, and that was about it. And I continued on. I never really stopped. And then at the age of 15, I was in a group, and our bass player kept going away every summer to college prep school. And so normally we would get a sub for him. And at the age of 15, we couldn't find a sub for his 12 weeks gone or whatever it was. So I raised my hand and said, "Let me give this a shot." And at first they were kind of skeptical, but they gave me the shot. And by the time he got back, I was like, "Look, you can get, you know, another vocalist if you want, but I'm going to stick with the bass. This is my instrument." And so that really started my whole career as a bassist. And I just really stayed working at that. There was a lot of great mentors in Columbus. It was a very competitive music scene, but very nurturing at the same time. They have Capital University, Ohio State, so they crank out young jazz masters, you know, like it's nobody's business. But I remember when I first wanted to go sit in with the big guys, and this was probably when I was 18 or 19 years old, and I recalled a jam session, and these were some of the better jazz funk guys around Columbus. And so I started playing along with them. I had no idea what I was doing. And the piano player reached over and unplugged my bass. And, you know, that's pretty humiliating and humbling, instant humbling in front of folks. But after that, when he went on break, he came up and put his arm around me and said, "Hey, let me talk to you. If you're going to come and play with musicians of this caliber, here's what you need to do. And here's what you need to know." So that really just gave me more incentive to really go after my craft on the bass and, practicing 6-8 hours a day till finally I kept going back and going back. And at one point, they actually started inviting me up to play. So it was a complete turnaround. So as I said, a competitive scene, but very nurturing. Columbus was a great music city.
So why did they unplug it? Is that what they do as a prank in the industry when you're trying to break in?
Oh, no, ma'am. It was because I had no idea what I was doing up there playing with those guys. I was not at that skill set. And so, needed to really hone in on my craft. And I was just making a mess of everything. So instead of allowing that to continue, the piano player just reached over, unplugged the bass. That was the cue to get off the stage, kid.
Wow, that is a humbling experience.
Yes, ma'am, it was.
Did you ever take lessons?
I did. I studied for a little while in Columbus with a couple of great jazz players, and just trying to figure out basic theory and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, I was working so much that at that stage of my life, I figured, well, you know what, I've got this down pretty well, which was a fallacy. I mean, I was doing okay for a self-taught musician. And I remember, there's a group that I worked with called Liaja in Columbus. And Michael Yates, an amazing drummer, still has the best foot I think I've ever heard in the industry. And, he nurtured me along into R&B because I was pretty much a rock guy before that, trying to be successful at that. And then we were at his place one day and he was playing some stuff and it took my head off. And it's like, who are these guys, And back then, I honestly, I didn't think white musicians could play like that because he was playing all funk and R&B stuff. I said, man, I really hope that, my wish would be as a white guy to be able to play like that. And so he stuck his head around the corner of his studio and said, those are white guys. So once again, it changed the trajectory of my career and really started listening then to serious R&B and funk players and really trying to develop that skill. And Mike and I worked together for years. We had a group called Liaja out of Columbus. We traveled all over the north part of the country, some stuff down south, and did a lot of concert openings for groups like Graham Central Station with Larry Graham and the Brothers Johnson. And so we were out doing a date in Michigan. I'll never forget. There was a gentleman that used to come and see us all the time, and he came up to me on a break and he said, "You do the best Rocco Prestia I've ever seen." Rocco Prestia, of course, is the amazing bassist with Tower of Power. And he had a major influence on my career. But what he said to me that day, or that night rather, really landed on me. And I knew at that time I had to develop my own voice. And so I stopped listening to Rocco to become his clone because I actually wanted that gig so bad in Tower of Power. When he left the group for a while, I think I was about 22, I actually called their offices. And Emilio Castillo, who started the band, was there with their manager that day. And I said, "Well, I don't know who you've hired, but you've hired the wrong guy." And they said, "Well, who should we have hired?" And I said, "Me." So, not knowing any better, that's how I chose to introduce myself. Of course, I didn't get the gig with Tower of Power. But it just kind of showed me that I was building confidence in myself as a performer and a player, to where I really wanted to start reaching out and see what other opportunities were there for me. So the manager that we had of that group, Liaja, we went to LA on a trip to talk to a few labels to see if we could get the group signed, demo in hand. And we did not get signed on that trip, but it showed me that, LA was sort of, the promised land for me. I just saw that this really vibrant music scene and, all kind of amazing things going on. So I came back to Columbus, obviously, with the manager and tried to talk everybody into moving out into LA. And they weren't ready to go, so I just ventured out on my own.
Well, one of the things that is interesting, because the band that you're talking about, wasn't that an interracial band?
It was. It absolutely was.
And I'm sure as you all traveled through the North and even down to the South, that you came across some practices of racism that you had the privilege, but the people that had brought you into the band did not have. You want to share some of those experiences?
Absolutely. It was, once again, just another life-changing experience for me. And the surprising thing was, we thought because we were in the North playing, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, New York, places like that, upper state New York, that we weren't going to run into that kind of prejudice. But to our surprise, we'd pull into motels, obviously with nobody there, and we would be told no rooms because we all went in together, to get the rooms. And so we developed a little skill set of our own there. When we would check into hotels, everybody would stay in the parking lot in the vehicles, and I would go in and rent the rooms and then come out and pass out the keys to everybody. And then the next day when they would see that we were a mixed band, we got a lot of dirty looks and displeasure. And so once again, it was an eye-opening experience for me. We would go to eat after the gig, nobody in a restaurant, little diners, and they just wouldn't walk over to service. So once again, even though I came from a pretty rough upbringing in the south end of Columbus, that was a lot of Irish, and we were right across though from the Lincoln Park projects. So I'd always lived in mixed neighborhoods. But even witnessing that and being a part of it, because I'd experienced prejudice against me and my own folks being Irish Americans, and like I said, impoverished, but nothing like that. That really changed my life for the better, because I became so aware of that. And it broke my heart to be out with people that I loved that had nurtured me in my career, to see that just because of the color of their skin, we couldn't get rooms or service at a restaurant. It was devastating.
I'm sure that was. So that probably really helped to broaden your view as you matriculated your music career.
Absolutely. That's the whole thing about it, Ryan, is that, when we grow up in, I guess what they call nowadays our little bubble, back then it was just our little neighborhood. We don't experience a lot of things until we're able to travel, experience different cultures, different attitudes. And that's one of the blessings of my career, is that I've been blessed to just travel the world and meet lots of different people from other cultures. And it just broadens your whole outlook. You find that those things that are kind of drilled into us of prejudice and racism when we're younger, those quickly disappear, because we discover that folks are folks. We all want the same things. We all love our kids. We want to be able to take care of them, live in a decent neighborhood. And, that's true for anybody. I don't care where you're from.
So what was your first, I'm going to say, prominent gig that you did?
Well, other than being the big guy, in the big fish in the small pond, but I hate to say that because there are so many gifted, talented people from Ohio, specifically. As a matter of fact, my wife is a native Californian, and every time we'll start talking about an artist or an actor, I'll go, by the way, did you know they're from Ohio? And so she's always going, yeah, who isn't? So, but when I first got to LA, I moved to Laguna Beach. The Laguna Beach music scene back then, in the late 70s, around 77, it was just so rich. There were so many recording artists that lived down there. And then when folks would come off tour, we'd go in the small clubs and play. And so, just to kind of blow everything out, because on a tour, you're kind of, you're playing a show. So it's almost the same thing every night. So in a club, you have more freedom. And especially if you have a resume, the club owners will let you get away with more stuff. So at any rate, there was a gentleman by the name of Randy Israti that saw me playing in a place called the Sandpiper in Laguna Beach. And I'll never forget, he came up to me and said, who are you? And I said, well, I just moved here. And he said, I think I know some people that may want to talk to you. Within a few days, I had a call from Al Jarreau's management company. Didn't feel like that was the right gig for me at that time. I did not have that much skill as a jazz player at that point. And even though there's a lot of R&B influence, there's still a lot of jazz influence with what Al was doing. So my next phone call came within a few weeks. Randy Israti was just, trying his best to bless me with a great gig. That phone call came from, the band was called the Larsen-Feiten Band. And they were also known as Full Moon. And so they had a hit when I joined the band called Who'll Be the Fool Tonight. And that was a big hit for them, but they were huge in Japan. And that was more funk fusion. And at that point in time, you know, I'd started to really develop the jazz style of my playing. And so I was a better fit for that. And the great Buzz Feiten was the guitarist. Neil Larsen was the keyboard player. And I'm sure you remember Stevie Wonder's Music of My Mind record.
Yes.
Maybe wants to be a super. So anyway, there were only 3 musicians on that record. Stevie played everything, you know, all the rhythm section instruments, and there was the trombonist, George Bohannon, and the guitarist was Buzz Feiten. So Buzzy started his career at the age of 16 with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And by the time he was 20 years old, he was one of the top session players in the world. And during that period, 70s, 80s, 90s, one of the most recorded guitarists out there. Also in that band was the great Lenny Castro, the percussionist, now from New York, who's worked with everybody and their brother. He did tons of recording and touring with Toto, amongst other people. I mean, his recording credits are through the roof. A lot of work with the great producer Quincy Jones. So, you know, you're talking Michael Jackson, all the heavyweight stuff. And then the late, great Art Rodriguez was on drums with that band. And I had left because they were mainly #1 session call players, you know, the #1 call guys in LA. I was not, and I wanted to work a little more than that. So I left and went out with what many people refer to as the godfather of smooth jazz, flutist Tim Weisberg. And so I was doing some touring with him. And then I got a call from Kenny Loggins, which is, you know, once again, another, you know, drummer influencing the trajectory of my career. The great Tristan Bowden, who was playing with Kenny at that time, amazing drummer. His credits go around the world. But Kenny was looking for a new bass player, and Tris told me that they were flying home from a date. And Kenny said, I knew we were going to need a new bass player. Do you know anybody? So Tris said, yeah, it so happens I've got this tape. Tris and I were doing a lot of funk fusion gigs around Laguna Beach in a band called the Funk Bunnies. And it was all these amazing guys who were touring and recording musicians. And as I said, they'd come off the road and we'd just go, you know, play original tunes and a lot of stretched out instrumental stuff. So anyway, Tris told me that he played the tape for Kenny, and that Kenny took his headphones off and said, you know this guy? And Tris said, yeah. Can you get him? Yeah, I think so. And so a few days later, I got a phone call from Kenny. So I went and recorded the song off of High Adventure, Heartlight. That was my first recording experience with him. That record was done, and he decided he didn't like the bass part. So when he called, he said, I understand you're the guy that can do you know, fixed bass tracks. And so I said, well, I don't know about that, but I'd love to give it a shot. And at that point in time, I was actually doing a lot of overdubs on records that were already finished, and they decided to change the bass part. So I'd worked with a lot of artists doing bass overdubs. So at any rate, after a few weeks, Kenny decided to offer me the tour. But the crazy thing about that was that the Larsen-Feiten band had decided to disband. So they called me and they said, hey, we really felt more like a band when you were here. Let's go do the last tour in Japan. So we did, and it was great. We just had an amazing time. But before the band left Tokyo to come home, word had gotten out that the group was breaking up. So before we hit the shores of America, Lenny went with Toto, the drummer went with Manhattan Transfer, Neil Larsen and I went with Kenny Loggins, and Buzzy Feiten went with Olivia Newton-John. So we all, you know, from our little jazz funk gig, you know, escalated up into more high visibility gigs. And then I'm sorry?
No, I was going to say, one of the things I'm really interested about is what, and you mentioned it several times, about somebody being really great as a session musician. So
yes,
how do you get to be a session musician, and what's that career track as a session musician?
Well, you know, some guys hang around for a long time and others don't. And it's pretty tough, especially out here on the West Coast. You know, this is where, you know, the heart of the industry was for so many years. I mean, a lot of people like to live out here because of the weather, not currently with our fires and stuff, but back then in the 70s and 80s, this was this was the center of the recording industry for pop music and even funk fusion and stuff like that. So my first experience on a big session date was with the Larsen-Feiten band and the Tower Power horn section. And my reading skills were not as sharp as they should have been. And my fundamentals were good, but my reading skills were, and you have to be an excellent reader to do studio work. So I recall in that session, bar 32, we'll use it as example after we got through the thing. And the thing that makes a great session player is they come in, they look at the music, you play it once, at the most twice, you move on. Because it costs a fortune to run a recording session with all A-listers. And so with that, I recall the producer telling me, hey, you know what? You've missed a note here on bar 32. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I punched it in. But I knew at that moment in time, if that door had opened for me and I was doing sessions of that level, I really needed to focus in on becoming a better reader and a better musician in general. So it's, it's somebody that you know who's going to take you in. If you're lucky enough to get with a contractor, you may have a decent run, but there's always younger guys coming up. Styles change. And so, it's not a long career for most.
That was really interesting because you hear a lot of people, musicians, talk about being session musicians, and I just wanted to have really a true explanation of what that consists of. And
right.
I guess it's a very competitive position to get in the first place.
It is very. It's kind of like sports. There's not a whole lot of positions out there. Typically in a town like LA, if they have to go down their list of guys, and every producer has their guys that they love to play with in the studio because they know what they're going to get. And so if they have to go past their second or third call on their list of guys, that they won't do the session. Or if they do, then one of the younger guys will have a shot to come in and do something. But it's typically a word of mouth thing. Hey, you should check this guy out. And you don't have to go on the road. It's very lucrative. And if you can get steady work, it's a great career.
What was the excitement the last tour that you did to Japan with the band that you were with that broke up? Give me a highlight of that tour in Japan.
Well, the great thing about that band over there, they had been known for quite a while. And so every time we toured Japan, the crowd knew exactly who we were, what we were going to play, sold out venues, very, very enthusiastic audiences. And I remember actually the first tour that I did, if you don't mind me segueing to that, with those guys in Japan, they have a custom where somebody will come up to the edge of the stage and present a gift. And so they kept telling me, go out and get the gift. You're the new guy. And so I was a little nervous about doing that. Didn't know what the protocol was. And so anyway, it's a lovely experience. You go out, and it was a really beautiful piece of artwork. And that was gifted to me. And then you're expected to give something in return. A tour shirt, jacket, something like that. So, I was learning all those things along the way. And then just the excitement, I think, of knowing that we were doing our last trip together on that last tour and how much we'd really bonded. It felt like a band, even though it was a bunch of guys who, Neil and Buzz had known each other for years and years and years. They had their first record was in, I think, the mid-'70s as Full Moon, which was a musician's band and a musician's record. Some of the first funk fusion stuff to ever come out. So I think just the joy of all of us being there together, but at the same time knowing it was kind of a last hurrah for that lineup. It was a great experience being there with everybody and playing just incredible music. It was an education for me every night on stage, learning from those gentlemen because they're so great at their craft. A lot of times, Ryan, folks will hear a record and think, well, that sounds pretty simple. Well, the reason why it sounds simple is that a lot of session players, if their skill set is at the ceiling, they're hanging around somewhere in the middle of the room. So a great player can make a complex part sound very simple. And then when you start tearing it apart, you go, no, wait a minute, that's not as simple as I thought it was. It's just the skill that makes it sound so.
So now let's tour with Kenny Loggins. Tell us about that experience.
That was amazing because that was a whole different level. After Kenny offered me the contract, we were actually in the studio recording, and he offered me the contract, and so it was kind of a hurrah moment for all of us because, as I said, some of us had known each other. Tris and I had known each other for a while, and I was his recommendation. So he felt good about recommending me for the date and actually having the skill set to pull it off. So, and we knew that we're going to be touring as friends. And that is so important when you're doing tours like that and doing, 250 dates a year. That's a lot of work. People don't realize. And so you want to be with guys that have great chemistry because if you don't, in the moment of stress and tension, things can go south real quick. So touring bands always want to make sure that they have musicians who are stable and that you have good chemistry with. So we had that working for us. And then once again, it was just playing with those guys every night. And then, to a fan base that Kenny had was amazing. I mean, we're talking when I was touring and recording with Kenny, that was 81 to 84. So some of those highlights were Saturday Night Live, and you've got, 36 million people tuning in. And then we did a special for HBO that once again, millions upon millions of people saw. So the exposure, the high visibility of a gig like that can really help solidify your position in the industry. A lot of people will figure, well, if he's strong enough to do that work in the studio and tour with those guys, I want him on my records. So then you go from knocking on doors to try to get through the door to people actually calling you. And so once again, just knowing how blessed I was to do all that stuff. But Kenny had not been out. Here's how strong of an artist he is. He had not been out in a couple of years. He took a year off to start his family. So, to do what he did every night, he's a phenomenal vocalist, 4.5, 5 octave range. But if you take some time off, you got to rebuild the chops a little bit, strengthen the muscles like you on your walk. You got to get back in shape and stay in shape. So at times he would actually lose his voice, write us notes, and put it under the door, have his assistant or whatever if we're going to make changes in the show, and then go out in front of 20, 25,000 people and sing his brains out. And I would just be amazed that this gentleman had no speaking voice, but yet in a live situation the same day, you could never tell. He had every note he needed. It was phenomenal to me to be around world-class talent like that. Because we all think of world-class like we know what it is, but I can assure you, until you stand next to it, it's a new experience. And what that does is it inspires you to elevate your skills and your gifts. So, touring the U.S., touring, once again, Japan with Kenny, Canada. It was part of the world tour. And so just a great experience with those gentlemen. Steve Wood, who was one of the other musicians that, once again, we all came from the same place in Laguna Beach. And Steve went on to produce so many of the IMAX films and score those musically. So we had him, Mike Hamilton, the brilliant guitarist. We had Neil Larsen, once again, another world-class player. Tristan Bowden on drums, and myself on bass. So I just felt like at every opportunity like that, I always looked at it like I was the worst guy in the band, which I loved, skill set wise, because then I knew that I would have to elevate to maintain my position. So it was just a lot of course, there was one funny story. Hopefully he won't mind me telling this, but we played the Tennessee State Fair one year. And so at the end of the show, they had these big pyrotechnics that they're going to set off and wow everybody with the production. And this was from the folks at the Tennessee State Fair. So when they lit everything up on our last song on the big finish chord, it said, "Welcome, Kenny Rogers." So, but he had a good sense of humor about it, and the band sure got a kick out of it. So it's kind of things like that, little oddities that you hang on to. You go, "Oh yeah, remember that." And then the thrill of doing the HBO special, that was great because the great producer David Foster was hanging around us quite a bit at that point. So you get to meet all these amazing people that you've heard about and read about, and most of them are just you know, down to earth, regular folks that know they're blessed to do what they do.
You know, when you left, what made you leave Kenny?
I'm sorry?
Why did you leave Kenny Loggins?
Kenny, at that point in time, decided to make a change. He was going to go with a couple of different players. And I had decided to take some time off. I had been touring and recording for 5 years straight. I had some money in the bank. I was tired from constantly working. And so I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Jerry Levin, that asked me if I wanted to do the Bette Midler tour. And I said, no, you know, not really. I'm kind of tired, man. I just, you know, I want to see if maybe there's something else that I can get into, maybe my own project or become a full partner in something already existing. I wanted to get beyond being a side band. And so he said, okay, well, would you like to do the record? I go, sure, of course I'll do the record. So anyway, I drove to the studio the next day and recorded with Bette. And that once again was an all-star lineup. The late great Ricky Lawson on drums. It started with a group called the Yellow Jackets, which most jazz funk fans are familiar with. Of course, Michael Jackson. The list of his credits were just amazing. So it's he, Bobby Martin from Frank Zappa's band, the great jazz pianist Bobby Lyle was on that date. Buzz Featon, the guitar player. So I had a partner there, so it relaxed me a little bit because going into those things can always be a high stress situation. Malondo from Al Jarreau's band. So we got along great. Bette Midler treated me like gold in the studio. We hit it off. She enjoyed my playing. I enjoyed her. And then I got home and the phone rang again and it was, so you're going to take the tour? And I said, no, I've already told you I'm not going to do the tour. So we kind of went back and forth and they made it pretty difficult to turn down. But at that point in time, I just didn't feel like it was time for me to go back on the road. So I enjoyed recording with her, but I turned the tour down. And most people would say I'm crazy for doing stuff like that. But, you know, I've always tried to just follow my own path with that. And if I felt something was right for me, then I would do it. And if not, I would turn it down. I would pass like Jarreau. Who passes on an opportunity to audition with Al Jarreau? But I just knew that I was not going to be a good fit for him. They were convinced I wasn't. So, and I'm pretty realistic about where my playing was. So I know it wasn't just being, you know, too overwhelmed by the situation. So that was my experience with Bette. And it was a great record. I had a lot of fun doing it. And as I said, she was a sweetheart. And I really enjoyed working with her.
What about Mason?
Dave Mason came within a year after taking that time off. There was Dave Mason, of course, and he's the Rock and Roll Hall of Famer and been around forever. He was with Traffic, if any people remember Traffic from way back in the day. But and Dave was, boy, what a great guy to work for, because he had all these jazz funk guys in his band, and we would play his hits, but then he would feature everybody. When it was time for him to feature, there was a great drummer doing the gig by the name of Billy Meeker. Once again, another great session player around LA that had done extensive touring with a lot of high visibility artists. And so when it was time to feature the rhythm section, Dave would clear the stage and leave Billy and myself out there for 10 or 15 minutes, do what you want. And that's pretty unselfish for a guy who's got a lot of hits to let his guys go out there and shine like that. So I always enjoyed working for people and with people that would allow their players to play, because that's why they hire you, for your skill set. And you'll find a lot of times, like we discussed, they know that you have a high skill set, but they want you to bring it down and play their show. Not that there's anything wrong with it, and it's not elementary music, but still there are guidelines that you have to follow. So when you find somebody who's gracious enough and secure enough in their career to allow you a moment to show your gifts, it's pretty special. So I really enjoyed working with Dave. That was great.
How long did you work with Dave?
I was probably with Dave for 2 or 3 years. We did extensive touring, and I did a record with him, Some Assembly Required. We started that in Dallas, finished in LA. And at the end of that, once again, it was time to do something else for me.
So it sounds like to me, Vernon, that you have an internal clock that regardless of what's going on around you, you are in tune to your internal clock on what you can do and what you can't do, or what you, and I mean, well, I guess it would be a Shakespearean quote, "To thy own self be true." And that is one of the things that comes across in listening to your account of things, is that you have that internal clock. Now, just tell me, give me 3 highlights so far that you've had in your career, or even 3 learning experiences that you have had, other than the one of having your guitar amp unplugged. That's probably the one thing I'm going to associate with you, and but nevertheless, give me 3 highlights. What countries did you go to that you really enjoyed? And
Sure.
And 3 highlights. I know you've talked about the HBO, but I want to move it into something more personal that we can relate to.
Sure. And I got to say, Saturday Night Live was a real thrill to do something like that. Boy, you want to talk about nerves. You go in on a Wednesday and you'll understand this language, do your blocking, get all your camera angles and all that stuff. And so just being a part of that set, it was a historic moment. And so no doubt for me that I consider that to be one of my highlights. Another one of my highlights would have been getting my own deal. I had a group called Above the Clouds that, we did a couple of records, and those were rated as the number 4 and number 5 jazz records of the year. And so it was great to be that critically acclaimed. And the great Michael McDonald actually sat in on our second record, and we redid the great Leon Ware song, If I Ever Lose This Heaven. So having Michael actually sing on one of my records and being such a fan of his, and he's a sweetheart of a man, has a real heart for people and a heart for service. He's an amazing guy. So that was a real highlight for me. I spent 25 years in music ministry, after Mason and all that stuff. That was the change that was coming. Maybe that's why I was so restless. But during that time, I toured with a gospel artist by the name of Don Moen. And Don Moen is very well known in Africa, places of that nature. And so I backed up Don in Northern California on a few dates for a gospel songwriters conference, and got a phone call from his management company about 3 weeks later saying, "Hey, Don, enjoyed working with you. Would like to know if you want to go out and finish the 3rd leg of his world tour." So we spoke with management, got everything worked out, and went to the first date was in London, no rehearsals. And because I said, they're all based out of Nashville, I said, "Are you going to fly me to Nashville for rehearsals?" They said, "No, we're not going to rehearse. We'll see you in London. We'll have a book. We'll send you the charts and everything. Be ready to play when we hit London." Okay. So we did the first one. And then Tilburg. And then we transitioned from Europe. Well, we recorded in I'm sorry, it's escaping me. Whitestone, I think. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name of the city, but anyway, we recorded there for a week. And then that was at a studio called ICM, where Paul McCartney records a lot. So sitting in the same chair in the same studio where McCartney records was a pretty special moment. From there, we went to Africa. The first gig was in Lagos, Nigeria, and they have this special event every year in December called The Experience. And it was attended by 500,000 people. Don Moen is huge in Africa, and they show their appreciation for artists by whistling. So as we took to the stage at about 1 a.m, it goes from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. Don was the headliner, so we hit the stage about 1 a.m, and you could hear 400,000 people, 500,000 people whistling in unison to welcome him to the stage. So that was a pretty surreal moment. I never thought I would play in front of a crowd that size live. So it was one of those things, you just kind of wink and go, "Thank you, God, I didn't see that one coming." But there was a moment in time that happened on that date that I'll never forget. We're standing in front of 500,000 people playing. My first tour with Don, John Weinglass, who's actually the cousin of Victor Wooten, was playing keyboards, second keyboard on that date, orchestrating. So he had never played those songs either. So anyway, they go into a song that neither one of us had ever heard in our lives. I'm trying to read Don's left hand for the bass notes, and then all of a sudden, he goes off key. And with gospel changes, you can have a new key center every quarter note. It's just constantly moving. So at that point, it was like, I hit a bad note. Nothing worse than being the guy that, hits the bad note because you don't know what the song's about. And so at any rate, the drummer, looks over at me and he says, what's going on? I said, I don't know this song. And he shouted out the name. I looked through my book of charts, nothing. He looks at me, you don't have it? No, I don't have it. So check again. So I go through the book again, can't find the chart. He looks out, once again, remember 500,000 people. He looks over at me, says, we got to get you a copy. So it's a little too late to get me a copy when you're playing in front of 500,000 people. So that, even though it was something that most folks would take as, a calamity, I actually really enjoyed it. It's just a moment in time, doesn't define your whole career. And so I found the humor in what happened. It's one of my favorite stories to tell other musicians because they really get it.
Well, tell me about Blue Eyed Soul.
Yes, ma'am. That for me as a kid growing up, of course, your influences, James Brown, the Temptations, Wilson Pickett, all the great stuff that came out of Stax, all the great stuff that came out of Motown. So yeah, there was a lot of us, white folks listening to that kind of music and bringing that influence in because we loved it so much and the artists who did that. And I've always had a concept that if you have the rhythm section, the bass player and the drummer laying a serious funk groove down, you can do whatever you want on top. You can turn it into a jazz instrumental, a vocal, whatever it is. And even there was a group out of Atlanta years ago called Mother's Finest. I don't know if you remember them or not.
I do.
But they were actually a black rock band. But their bottom half, the drums and the bass player, was still just blowing out funk grooves. So you had that whole concept of constantly marrying these different styles of music. And those influences, they rubbed off on everybody. So the next thing you know, you've got, Daryl Hall from Hall and Oates, who sold a lot of hits to black artists back in that day. And then they finally did their first record. And you hear all those influences come about. So you've got people like that, Kenny Loggins. Kenny really, boy, you want to talk about a career that transitioned. He started as a country rock guy and then more rock guy. And, when he took his own career solo. And then by the third record that I did with him, High Adventure, and even the ones before that, there were always those elements of groove in there. But by High Adventure, he was working with David Foster, co-writing with Michael McDonald, and a lot of that stuff just had such a great groove to it. And once again, a great vocalist. And it's not easy to transition your career from a country rock guy to a blue-eyed soul guy. I recall that we went to Canada for a date on one of the tours, and they weren't real happy because they showed up in flannel shirts and, they were ready to hear him do all of his early hits, of which we were doing nothing. So they tried to, put him in a pigeonhole, put him in a box. But Kenny wouldn't do that. He knew where he wanted to go. So they're, average white band, as I said, Loggins, McDonald, so many great artists, Daryl Hall, that you hear that and it's undeniable, the influence from black artists and what that has done to cross over in all areas of music. So the blue-eyed soul thing is really much bigger and has more heart in it than, sometimes they'll label it, as they often have to put labels on things, as soft rock. And so I was sharing a story earlier that, a lot of us guys were not real fond of that tag that they'd put on us. So we'd act like the heavy metal guys and hold out our fists instead of saying, hard rock, we'd go soft rock, man. Just a joke, because we felt it was kind of really trying to put it in a box. and it wasn't that at all. One thing I'll say about Kenny Loggins, his shows live were so energetic. I mean, from note one till the end, we never took our foot off the pedal. In the middle of the show, he would do, his acoustic thing, but as a band, it was on. You had to bring your skill set every night. And it's just that R&B fire that we were able to even use more of live. Because that's the thing, your record is one way, and then you go out and live, you open it up a little bit. And so that experience working with those artists, having Michael sing on my record, one of the most well-known blue-eyed soul vocalists of all time, that certainly a highlight. And that type of music, as I said, it's the love for all of us. We truly love that music. It's in our foundation. And so what you do is you take that and then you add your own voice with it. And, so now you got blue-eyed soul guys.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to play the guitar for me.
Well, sure. Let's see if we can do a little bit of that for you.
Yes, it would be to not to be able to talk to a guitarist and not hear a little strumming here.
Well, we'll see what I can get out today.
What kind of guitar is it?
I play Sadowski basses. Roger Sadowski is a custom builder out of New York. I absolutely love his instruments. I've been using them since 2006. And so, I just love his instruments. He's an amazing custom builder. And then my amp is built by another company out of New York called Epiphany. And I'm an endorsing artist with Epiphany. They have artists like Ron Carter, Anthony Jackson, one of the greatest bassists in the world, a lot of jazz and urban gospel and funk guys. And I've been with them now for about 3 years and really enjoy being with them. Very supportive companies. And, you want to make sure when you're going out to do live dates that you've got stuff that's going to sound great and be reliable. And both of these companies have made a big difference in my live playing and even tracking. I use the same stuff when I'm doing records. I have a record with Dan Carlin that's getting ready to come out within the next couple of months. And that's just straight funk instrumental stuff, and I use my full rig, amp and everything in the studio. So I'm excited for that to come out.
So I'm going to ask you to kind of push back a little bit so I can see you play.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is that better?
No, a little more.
Okay.
I can't see the guitar.
You can't?
Yeah, I can't see it. And I want to see you play. There you go.
How about if I stand up?
That'll work. That'll work.
Okay. All right. So early influences, we had a lot of smoke out here. I was going to try to sing a little bit for you this morning, but boy, the pipes are not what they should be. So maybe I can squeeze out a little James Brown scream or something,
Okay.
That's my James for you. And then, so the other things, let's see here. Now with Kenny, a lot of people know this one.
Heart to heart.
That's heart to heart.
Yes, heart to heart.
Remember that? Okay.
Yes.
And then also, let's see here, with my own, well, I'll do a few more Kennys for you. Now, this was written by Michael and Kenny, and some of your folks may remember this. It's called I Gotta Try. It's ringing a bell, the bass line?
Yes.
Maybe, maybe not. Anyway, that's called I Gotta Try. That was written by Michael and Kenny. And then Michael did, on my record, we did the great Leon Ware song, If You're Fooling, Only Fooling, All I Ask Is Why, If I Ever Lose This Heaven.
Well,
and so Michael sang on that for me. And I actually pulled a little bit of a prank on him at the end of the session where I asked the engineer, and Michael asked me from the booth, hey, is there anything else you need, Vernon? And so I told the engineer, hey man, do your best Michael McDonald impersonation and ask him to do that. He said, I'm not going to do that with Michael McDonald. So I said, open up the mic. And I said, yeah, just on the outro, give me one, yeah, baby, which he's known for. So Michael said, yeah, man, everybody does me and Ed Sullivan. So he was a good sport about that. But we did the Leon Ware song, If I Ever Lose This Heaven. And Leon Ware was very gracious, reached out, thanked us for doing his tune. So at any rate, we have that. And let me see here. What else can we do for you? We did, sorry?
No, I was going to say, you can rest, you can sit down and we have seen the sick guitar. So now you can play more comfortably. But I appreciate that. You can finish playing, but I was saying you don't have to stand any longer. We wanted to see the guitar.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate that. I'll just play a little lick for it.
You know, Vernon, I'm going to give you my clap, and I'm going to say, I'm going to say to you, do you miss being out on the road at all?
At times I do. I stopped touring. My daughter was born, she was 3 months old, and I missed the first 3 months of her life. And I did not want to be an absentee father. So I stopped touring and ended up mainly producing a lot of records for a lot of independent artists, and also doing a lot of session work as much as I could, and that's how I raised my family. And then when I released my Above the Clouds records, my instrumental records, that was 20 years ago now, started going back out and doing some touring work, which I enjoyed. And now at this stage of my life, I've actually got some projects in the works that stacked up like LA air traffic. So as soon as the pandemic gets figured out, there's a lot of great projects. There's a great trumpet player by the name of Gary Winters, and he's from the Cincinnati area. He's been with Fred Wesley in the New JBs for 20 years. He and I toured together back in the 70s. We're talking about doing a record which would take me to Europe to do Germany and France, places like that, which would be great. This other new group that we've put together, I can't give all of it up because of the promo. The management company would be angry if I did. But we had just gotten into 5 rehearsals when we had to stop because of the pandemic, and we had already been talking with folks about a Japanese tour and some other things. So when all this gets figured out, I think some of us, I'll use the word mature guys instead of old guys, are looking forward to going out and doing some limited touring. I don't think, not like the old days, a couple hundred dates a year, we would all miss our families. But, I think we'd like to get back out with the people again, because there's nothing like playing in front of a live audience.
I believe that. The energy and the synergy that you would get from a live audience. I was reading in your bio, and it was something about a Monk Montgomery. You want to talk about him a little bit?
Sure. The great Wes Montgomery's brother was a bass instructor. He took a couple lessons with him. There was the great bassist Cornell Wilde, another great upright jazz guy out of Columbus, went with him for a few lessons. Those, sitting with people like that, masters on their instrument, was incredible. But, once again, upright guys. I made a decision when I was really trying to get my career jumped off to not be a guy that worked on upright and electric, because it's so difficult. They're really two different instruments. So to become great at both is difficult. A lot of people can't do that. So I really wanted to focus on the electric bass. But just being around those gentlemen, for a few lessons was life-changing.
As we're winding up, what are you doing? You mentioned some of the things that you're doing, but you suffered a severe tragic in your life, and how has that impacted you, and what are you doing about that? I think I would like very much if you feel comfortable enough to share that.
I do. I do, because It's okay to scoot back in with you?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it is.
Well, yes, ma'am, it is important. Pardon me for 1 second here. Unless you shine a light on darkness, you can't change anything. In 2010, my 22-year-old daughter, it was 4 days past her 22nd birthday. And she was picked up at her work by a couple of young ladies that she really didn't know that well, and was taken to this man's house where she was overdosed on a drug called Opana. Most people have never heard of it. It was banned in this country for 4 decades before lobby dollars brought it back out into the marketplace. One pill, this is an opiate, could end 4 lives. And so that's what she was dosed with. She went into distress at about midnight, and they put her in a room and closed the door to basically just let her pass away. So when we received the phone call the next day, I got home. Vanessa was my daughter, and she was waiting for a new place to open up, so she was staying with us for a couple of weeks. And this was so unlike her. Her and I always maintained great contact. Like I said, I left the road to make sure I was present in my children's lives. And so we had a great relationship. And when the next day, when the coroner called, when I called the coroner's office and found out that it was my daughter, it shattered my life, as any parent who's lost a child would know. Regardless of what ends their life, car wreck, natural causes, whatever, because my wife, Valerie, her oldest daughter, was a special needs child, and she passed away at the age of 17, 3 months into our marriage. It was our second marriage for each of us. So now we'd lost 2 daughters. Just devastated. I stepped away from everything. At that point in time, I was doing music ministry at a church, music pastor, worship pastor. I stepped away from that, tried to figure out what I wanted to do, met with some folks about doing a documentary to raise awareness of the opiate epidemic all over the country, but certainly in Orange County where we live. And there were a lot of young people that they would get frightened. You know, when you're chemically imbalanced, you're not thinking correctly. So when one of their friends would go into distress, like my daughter, instead of taking them to an emergency room, they would drop them off at the beach or in a field and or lock them in a room like with Vanessa. And so by the time they're found, they're no longer with us. So it really came upon my heart to get involved in what's called the Good Samaritan Law. The Good Samaritan Law, now, when we first started this, it was only available in 3 states, Washington, Colorado, and New York, I believe. So it was an uphill battle. We became parent advocates, did a lot of work in Sacramento, California, the state capital, and also Washington, D.C. with the federal government. Even though it was a state's law, I knew if I could get federal lawmakers on my side, I would have a better chance of getting it passed. So, the choice was, what do you do with your pain? Do you find purpose with it? Do you go out and educate and try to make your world a better place? Or do you just shut off from the rest of the world like many people do because the grief is so overwhelming? And I had made the decision that, no, I'm going to get involved. So we put purpose with our pain, and we pursued that law, and it was very, very difficult. A great legislator, Congresswoman Mary Bono Mack was her name at that time, and that was Sonny Bono's widow, if you remember Sonny and Cher. So she took his congressional seat when he had passed from a skiing accident. So at any rate, she became a great advocate for us, and it wasn't that way at first. At first, we were both at the same event, kind of yelling at each other about, I need this law passed, and well, no, you don't. And so a few weeks later, she called me and brought us out to the Betty Ford Center, where they were having a large meeting over this opiate epidemic, and apologized to myself and my wife at this event at a stand. And I really didn't expect that. I didn't know what to expect. So she became a great champion for us that day. So at any rate, the Good Samaritan Law means that if you call 911, there's no fear of prosecution. If you're with somebody that goes into distress over drugs or alcohol, and let's not forget, alcohol is still a big issue for young people, and many of them lose their lives. So we wanted to make sure that it covered drugs and alcohol. So you can call 911, there's no fear of prosecution, and you're actually just saving a life. So 28 months to the day of her passing, Governor Brown out here signed that bill into law. And we had never worked so hard on anything in our lives. And So then it was kind of like, well, what do I do now? You know, I kind of fell apart all over again. But then I started getting phone calls from just random people that I did not know saying, thank you so much for working so hard on that. I want you to know that it saved a life last night in Davis at a college. I want you to know it saved a life in Orange County. I want you to know it saved a life in LA. So I really appreciate you asking me about this, because there's still not enough knowledge out there. And Ohio has their own Good Samaritan law as well. I'm not sure the particulars because I didn't work on it. But I know that there's not enough people that know about those laws, and we still lose way too many people, especially with the fentanyl and everything. It's far worse. And now with the pandemic, overdoses are up 30%, suicide. So there's always a need for us to try to help shine a light on that darkness to help people out of their situation.
Thank you so much, Vernon, for sharing that.
Sure. Appreciate you, Ann.
Because people need to know that there's opportunities out there to help with the opiate crisis that we are facing at all different times and places.
Yes.
So, as we are winding up, what would you like to say is the definition of funk to you?
Well, funk to me actually can go with a lot of different definitions, because even included in that one word of funk, you've got greasy digging ditches funk, you got sophisticated funk, you got funk fusion. So to me, it all starts with the rhythm section, pardon me. If you got a great drummer, you got a great band. And then if you got a great drummer and a great bass player, sorry fellas, it's about the rhythm section, then you really have something to talk about. So funk to me is an attitude that you bring to your playing. It's aggressive, but controlled aggression. And, you know, in a great way, because even though it's an aggressive type of music, it's so uplifting. And the great thing about funk, you know, is there's a lot of minor chord stuff that works with funk. And most people think that minor chords are dark. And so if I hear somebody tell me that, oh no, minor makes it dark, it's like, you've never played in a funk band, have you? So that's what it is to me. It's always been at the core of what I try to do. Even working with artists who aren't considered as funk artists, they've always allowed me to bring that element of my playing into their situation, which I'm really grateful for. And it just, you know, it makes folks happy. It's just happy, happy music, and I love it.
Yeah, funk is an attitude.
It is an attitude.
And my final question is, why do you think it's important for us to have the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center? And what would you be willing to donate to us?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, first of all, I'll tell you that I'm going to send you off one of the basses that I used to record with Kenny and Bette Midler.
Oh.
And hopefully that'll be enjoyable for the folks. And I'll send a picture along with it of me actually using it. And then the other thing that I think is so important about what is taking place and what you're doing is the education, first of all. Young folks need fundamentals. They need an education. I think it's really important to reach back, especially for those of us who've been blessed with visibility and a career, to reach back and pull those young folks forward with our knowledge. We have to give that away. It was freely given to us. Now we have to freely give that away to help them understand what it means to be a professional, because it's a whole different attitude than just hanging out and playing in the garage with your buddies or in a club. So there's many things that you have to develop. So I think what you're doing with bringing all these professionals in, you know, that really is going to speak to young folks, speak to their heart. You have to have your fundamentals together. If you desire to be a session player, you got to know how to read, and you have to have many different attitudes underneath your fingers. And then the other thing is, you know, today with so much of the music being manufactured, I don't want to come from a critical place with a critical spirit, but as the great producer Dean Parks said, you know, before Pro Tools, we had pros. And so I think it's important for young people to actually learn a craft. It's one thing to be able to sit in with your computer and develop things. And, you know, if that's what you're going for, I'm not mad at you. God bless you. You know, that's your path to walk. But if you want to be a musician, there's so many things that you have to look at. Attitude, skill set, you know, on and on down the road. And so that's what I'm excited about what you're doing. I'm so excited to be a part of this. And I'm hoping to get involved to whatever level that I would be invited to join in. I just think it's a wonderful project. And I am truly humbled by this whole experience. I just didn't see it coming. And for a native son of Ohio, this is a big deal for me. It's like I'm 12 years old and starting all over again.
Oh, Vernon, it's just been my pleasure. And thank you so much, and wish you the best on all your projects that you're working on. And I'm going to keep an ear out for your latest recordings that's going to be dropped soon.
Yes, ma'am.
This is Rhine McLin.
I'll send you one.
Well, go right ahead.
I'll send you one.
Uh-oh, I'm going to be looking for it.
As soon as it comes out, it's on the way, trust me.
Thank you. This is Rhine McLin, host of the Funk Music Hall of Fame and Exhibition Center's award-winning show, Funk Chronicles. Until the next time, keep it funky, funky, funky.